here. Hey, Johnny, where are you rebelling against?
What do you got?
1950s juvenile delinquency. You know, I get sick and tired of people say that the 50s was such a conservative time. In reality, yes, it had a big conservative atmosphere, but that was mostly older people, kind of like now. Not to put down all conservatives, of course, I'm just talking about it historically here. And this video is not really meant to be a political either, except for maybe a couple things. But with that said, we're going to look at the more dangerous 1950s. And let me tell you, spoiler alert, it's nothing like Happy Days, or Leave It to Beaver, or any of those.
In this comic book is a love story. A boy and girl in love. They get married, and after an offensively lurid description, illustrated, of course, of the couple's wedding night, the book shows how the bride murders her husband by chopping his head off with an axe.
That's right. Before rock and roll, really, the main focus of juvenile delinquency, of fear, came from comic books. Specifically crime and horror comics. You see, comic book comic book publishers like EC Comics, not to be confused with DC, came up with these, Tales of the Crypt, the Block of Horror, which I love, by the way. And, it kind of showed how people felt in these days when you look at these anti-comic book propaganda, right? The whole sub-hearing was about this. They're gonna turn our kids into monsters and stuff. Now, when people bring up the fact that the 50s was quote-unquote conservative, they mainly talk about how things were so innocent, but really, no. I mean, yes, they tried, but even in the cracks have shown, And yes, there was a lot of censorship back in the 50s, that I can say. But for the most part, it wasn't conservative. And if you look at these early comics, yeah, I would argue that when people think about when the 50s were conservative, they usually think about, like, the very tail end, right? When all the good stuff were kind of tucked away. I'm actually going to leave you guys this article. 1950s punk, and that's what I have been saying for the longest time, people. The 50s in many cases was the first punk rock, right? And this, and I know a couple things are missing from this article, but I think you may get the gist. This and another video series actually, who does like juvenile delinquent history, I will post it in the comments as well. I'm mostly getting my influence from the talk here. And plus, the 50s is, before I was into anything else, in high school I was very much into this decade. And I get so tired. I know I'm repeating myself here, but I just get so tired. I mean, this was the era of the freaking beatniks. Now, I would even argue that the 50s in many cases was more radical in the 60s. Because it's where it all began, right? This is where youth culture, counterculture all began. So if it was conservative, why did we have all this counterculture? Well, the answer is, overall, it was conservative at first, in the 40s. what was going on, kind of like how Gen Xers rebelled against the 70s, they were rebelling against the 40s. I mean, look at Little Richard for example, right? Like a epitome of rock and roll. Not just a black man in the time where that wasn't acceptable, but he was also a gay man. A black, gay rock and roller. You know, he broke the mold for many. You know, and I think people miss this when they talk about the 50s, because most people, when they think of the 50s, they think of some type of Leave It to Beaver, Happy Days. No, this was the real... The 50s was a rock and roll, Atomic Fears, the Beatniks, weird stuff. That was the 50s and early 60s, not... Gee whiz, Wowie! No. And I feel like people forget this. It was dangerous. The only thing I can kind of compare the 50s to, like I said, it was the original punk rock, right? The Ramones and stuff, like the CBGB's New York scene. I'm not talking about the England scene, though I don't hate the England punk scene, though I do think New York was better. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The CBGB punk scene was kind of like the 50s, right? It was kind of, if you think about it, the 77 punk scene was the closest thing to what, you know, in fact, the only reason why punk rock started in the first place, what most people forget also, is because rock and roll at the time was watered down. Too much politics. It was too much parents' music, too much grown-up music. And when, you know, punk came around, it was supposed to tell them, hey, this is what rock and roll is actually supposed to sound and be like. Anyway, I know this wasn't a overall, you know, I know it was kind of a rambly video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. I will make more videos like this, and I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, have a good day and bye. And remember, the 50s was not conservative.